Hello again. My name is Sarah Allen, and I hate the movie Anora. Hello. It's been a very long time. It's been almost a year, I think, since my last video, and that is because I've been really busy. Since my last video, I have finished my second and final semester of college. I'll be graduating in a few months, which is really crazy. I wrote and directed a short film, which will hopefully be out next year, and I produced a documentary, which is really cool. It's only a short, but I did it myself. In that amount of time, I also came up with tons of things I want to talk about, but was so busy I was never able to actually talk about them. So I created a list and I wrote everything down. I wrote essays for my lectures, and I wrote essays for my Substack, and I wrote essays for myself. I did not put any of them to video because I also moved, as you can tell from my background and my weird lighting, because this is the first video I'm filming in my new place. So I thought, in my new place, with so many new things happening and with all my real busyness behind me, why not sit down and do an actual full-on video essay? Instead, I sat and I thought and I went, you know what is really important to me? Women. Women are incredibly important to me, and I think that women in all senses of media and reality over the last few years have really been put under a misogynistic lens without them or us wanting that or consenting to that. And I think that rape culture has gotten completely out of hand, and I think that men having their grasp on women's lives and stories is reverting back to what it was prior to this millennium. I wanted to focus that on a particular kind of woman, and that is the sex worker. I think that the sex worker in particular is a woman who has been exploited more so than she had ever been, which is saying a lot. In the last 10 years, this uptick in the male lens of sex work and seeing these women as just objects and not women. You hear a lot of time on crime shows and in crime movies, you can't rape a prostitute, you can. And I would argue there was way more ways to rape a prostitute than not. A movie came out a few years ago. A movie came out in 2023 or 2024. I can't remember, and I don't care to look it up, called Anora. And this is a movie that I despise. I hate it so much. I sat and I watched this movie in the cinema with one of my best friends and my now boyfriend, and I left it crying because I have never felt more sorry for a female character. I have never felt more objectified as a woman. I think that Anora brought attention to sex work, but I don't think it brought good attention or the right attention. I think it just shone a light on sex work that it was, if you give her enough money, she will think that you love her and she will want to stay with you, and you don't have to. This is compounded with Euphoria. The series Euphoria, which first came out in 2019 and is now airing its third season, which centers around the character of Cassie, played by the notorious Sydney Sweeney, as an OnlyFans model. I think that Sean Baker and Sam Levinson use their abilities and connections to abuse and create assault fantasies for themselves and to punish women for doing sex work while feigning the uplifting of them. I don't think it's something that has really been touched on because, as we know, Anora was praised. It won Oscars and Golden Globes, and while Mikey Madison delivered a near flawless performance, she was given a disgusting script. And while I think Zendaya deserved her Emmy for playing Rue in Euphoria, I think that Euphoria is one of those shows that should never have been made. You cannot talk about sex work in media without first knowing what sex work is. And while everybody can probably pick up on what sex work is, where does it come from and why does it exist? Sex work does not exist without the objectification of women's bodies. Now, while I am fully aware that there is and always has been male sex workers, it is primarily associated with women's bodies and men taking over or domineering women's bodies through money. Sex work has saved as many women as it has killed throughout the world, throughout history, all across the world. women have made a living over selling their bodies, over allowing themselves to be abused, over allowing themselves to be objectified, because it gave them financial freedom, it gave them stable income, it gave them a feeling of being wanted and needed and deserved. Think like the consorts and concubines in palaces all over the world, the mistresses of kings, they were treated almost as well as the queens. Almost as well. But they were not respected by other women, and they were not respected by other men. And sex work is such a difficult thing to discuss, especially now in this day and age where not only is it more accessible for men to get access to women, but it's more accessible for women to join sex work. Whereas beforehand, you would need to like be a certain standing or join a certain group. Now you can just go online and you can do it. Like pre-internet sex work is not something that I even know much about through my research of this. However, while sex work has given and continues to give women a certain level of financial freedom and control over their bodies, which is the plotline that Cassie is following in Euphoria, it also has and continues to destroy women's lives. Women who will do like a porno or sell images because they need to pay for something like college, a car, a mortgage, a rent, anything, out of sheer desperation, and now have to live with that fact, live with what they've done, regret it possibly, and also know that those images are out there forever, and they don't know what that person is going to do with that, or do with this knowledge, or do with whatever. You're putting yourself in an incredibly unsafe environment time and time again. Sex workers are also putting themselves in a huge amount of risk when it comes to being assaulted. If you are a stripper, you every day have to walk into work with the fear that someone is going to grab, touch, or do something to you that you do not consent to, and you also have to grapple with the fact that you probably will not be believed that it was not consented to. And that is the hardest thing for me to really think of, that some poor young girl my age could be anywhere in the world right now having something done to her that she does not want to, and she will never have anybody to talk to about it. And this is my first problem with the movie Anora. Strippers are not the same thing as prostitutes. One is a woman who chooses to, for the most part, dance in a club, typically for men, but not always. Strip clubs are very common. And take your clothes off and dance provocatively and make money through that. And that is perfectly okay. You do you if it's your choice. One of my issues with Anora is that it sort of establishes that strippers will fuck you. Strippers will have sex with you if you pay them enough. And this is simply not true. There are many, many strippers on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, who have spoken about not doing quote unquote happy endings. There is one stripper in particular who I really enjoy her content. I'll put her handle right here because I think that she's very interesting and that her life is very interesting. And most of what she posts is her talking about the work, talking about beauty, about the upkeep, about all the things, but what she also does is talk about the dangers and why she wouldn't recommend it to young girls. Anora both glamorized the idea of sex work, but also made it seem like sex was a part of it all the time. The general plot of Anora is a woman called Annie who is in her early 20s, lives in Brooklyn, and she is a stripper. She lives with her sister and her sister's boyfriend in a very, very small house along the pier, and they're very, very poor. She goes to her club, she strips. There's a man, a younger Russian man who is the son of an oligarch, and Annie is part Russian and speaks Russian near fluently. Her Russian name is Anora. Throughout the film, Annie repeatedly tells everybody to stop calling her Anora. Her name is Annie. And they don't listen to her. This son of an oligarch basically takes her on like this insane week. Gives her tons of money, takes her places, shows her off to his friends. They go out, they drink, they party. She has sex with him. He pays her. They go to Vegas at one point, and Annie and him get married in one of those shotgun Vegas weddings. Once they get married, Annie basically sees this man as her meal ticket. He has all this money, he just married her, and Why wouldn't she? He has done nothing but bankroll her, tell her how beautiful she is, tell her how she's all these things, then marry her, so she doesn't see a reason for her to continue stripping. Would you? She goes to the strip club, she quits. It's a whole thing, it's a big fight, but she quits and she doesn't work there anymore. So she has lost her income. She has lost her control over her finances because she married this man who basically told her, I'll take care of everything for you, baby. They're sitting together. She does this disgustingly provocative dance for him. And I'm saying disgustingly provocative because within a normal context, like, if this was like, if this was something that was done between a husband and a wife in their own living room, more power to you. But this is like the third or fourth time we have seen Mikey Madison, who is an incredibly young woman, have to appear almost completely naked on screen in very objectifying ways. She's being stared at just by this guy who is repeatedly paying her to do these things, paid her to marry him, paid her to do all this, paid her to quit her job. He sees her as this toy that he is basically getting to dance whenever he needs her to. It gets even worse when you consider the fact that in an interview Mikey Madison did with Pamela Anderson, she says that there is no intimacy coordinator on set. This is an incredibly dangerous situation to be in for any female performer. But the fact that Sean Baker, the male writer and director of this disgusting story, was allowed to sit there himself in his little director's chair and watch early to mid-20s Mikey Madison strip down with nobody to protect her or protect her best interest, that's so incredibly disgusting. And while she does say, like, it didn't bother her, it wasn't a problem, how would she know that it wasn't a problem if she's never been on a set with an intimacy coordinator, if she's never been on a set with somebody who has blocked this out for you? You cannot tell me that there's no coercion there. If you are a 20-something-year-old girl and you're in a movie by a man who is being, lauded as this great new artistic filmmaker, and you're being told that you're making this movie that's gonna represent all these things for all these people, you just need to strip down all the time and, like, show your body to the camera directly and to the mostly male cast. You have to do it for the movie. She's gonna do it for the movie. If you're never told there's an option of having someone on set to cover you up a little bit or to give you prosthetics or to help you do this with somebody in a safe and respectful way. And we don't know that it wasn't safe, but it wasn't respectful. However, we also don't know that it was. And I think that that is a huge issue. She's performing this dance for him. Two men who work for his father break into this ginormous house that they're living in. And he bolts. He leaves. He abandons Annie in this house with these two strange men. They then proceed to tie her up because she is screaming so loud. And there is this, what's supposed to be comic sequence where these two men are speaking in Russian to each other about how she won't stop screaming and oh my god, she's so annoying and how do we shut her up. They just broke into this woman's house, what she now thinks is her house, tie her up, and she, up until this point, has only ever had one good experience with men, and it is the man who just abandoned her. The man who coerced her into marriage through money, objectified her repeatedly, and now has abandoned her. And she is screaming for help, screaming, and then she's screaming rape, basically trying to get anyone's attention, and no one is listening to her, while these two men argue over how to shut her up. And we're supposed to laugh? We, the audience, are supposed to find that funny? Us women are supposed to find that funny? We're supposed to find it funny that two men have broken into this other girl's house and tied her up? Because I don't find that funny. Because I also know that if I'm sitting in this house right now and two men were to break in and tie me up and I was to scream and I was to scream rape, it's very unlikely anyone would come and save me. She is a stripper and she is a woman, therefore she is not worth being listened to. Why would you care? She sells her body for sex. She's a prostitute. Don't listen to her. Why do you care about her? And I'm not a stripper. And I'm not a prostitute. And they verbally talk down on her for being such things. The movie then proceeds to them finding him and his parents coming and his parents pressuring her into a divorce. And she repeatedly says, no, we're married. Like, I'm not going to divorce him just because you told me to. Like, help me. Like, why aren't you helping me? Why aren't you telling your mother no? And he doesn't help her. They end up having to get a divorce. His mother is verbally abusive and speaks down to Annie the entire time. He looks at her and tells her it was a fun trip. Because that's all she was to him. She was just a trip. She was just something he was able to pay for. No one is there for this woman throughout the entire film. There is one man who is nice to her. He doesn't respect her. He's still tied, and it's one of the two men who tied her up then becomes nice to her and is like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have tied her up, and like, maybe we should help her, and maybe we should call her by her name, because they're all calling her Anora. She does not want to be called Anora. Because this one man was nice-ish to her, he's supposed to be our love interest. Just the perspective on Annie I find insane from the storytelling point of view, because this movie is called Anora, so it's technically supposed to be about her, but it's not even her name. It's not what she wants. It's not her identity. And this entire film is through the POV of the men around her. But like, it's supposedly her story and like her journey. It's from the point of view of the men in the club as the film opens and we see her dancing topless on a man. It's from then the club owner who's talking down to her, to the point of view of the husband, who, like I said, treats her like nothing but an object, something to buy and sell, and she thinks that she has found someone who's going to protect her because he has told her that he is someone who will protect her and who will finance her. To then the men who tied her up, their point of view. Never once do we get to see the film or the story or the landscape or really feel what she's feeling or think what she's thinking. We are force-fed the man's point of view. But the visuals are so pretty. It's a beautifully shot film, and there's so much colour and so much shininess and so much pink, so it must be her story and it must be her point of view. Not really. The film ends with them getting a divorce, which her life is over. She left the club that she was working in a giant outburst. She can't go back to work there. She got into a fight with the girls. There was a big screaming match. Like, she can't go back there. So she has no job. She is still poor. She has just sold herself for 2 weeks and gotten nearly nothing from it. She is then driven home by one of the men. And instead of it ending and her getting to gain back her autonomy and get out of the car and just go, hey, I need to get my life on track. I need to find a new job. Or I need to go back to the club and I need to figure it out. Instead of it ending with her leaving, the film ends with her getting from the passenger seat into the driver's seat, climbing on top of him, and him enjoying it, and him taking his trousers down, and her starting to do him, until she breaks down in tears. And it feels like the movie ends with this message of, if she had only chosen the right guy, if she had just chosen him all along, if she had just went with him, if she hadn't decided to go and sit with the rich Russian oligarch who specifically requested her and did nothing but pay her, if she hadn't quit her job, her life wouldn't be like this. If she didn't choose to be a stripper, her life wouldn't be like this. If she didn't choose to screw men for money, she wouldn't be sitting here crying right now. And look at him, he's hugging her, he's keeping her safe. She should have chosen him, but 2 seconds prior, he was just pulling down his trousers. Now, the story overall, I personally find objectable. I find it quite disgusting, and I think that it degrades what sex workers do and what they go through. And I really don't and didn't and still probably never will understand the love it received from the sex work community. But I think that it's one of those situations where you're told any representation is good representation. There isn't a lot of representation for sex workers in media, especially modern sex workers. With the advent of strip clubs and technology and all these things, I don't think this was good representation. And I am not a stripper, I'm not a sex worker, so it isn't my place to say, but I do think that this film placed the lens entirely on the men around her. And it would have been a better movie if they had kept the story the same, but instead of having it about the men, have it be about her. Have it be her point of view and how she feels. Have the film end with her gaining back her autonomy. have her gain something, because she did nothing but lose throughout the whole film, and she wound up worse than she started. And the only thing she did wrong was be a sex worker. The only thing Annie did was try and have her own sort of financial freedom. And as established from the opening of the film, she didn't really choose to be a stripper. She's good at it, and I'm sure she might like it. But she's from a very low income area in a run-down looking home, and there's not a lot of job opportunities for women to make a good and stable income in these situations. A lot of them turn to sex work, a lot of them turn to stripping, and I find that Sean Baker decided to punish a woman he wrote. I think that a lot of men see sex work as the worst thing a woman can do, because it is her degrading herself and selling her body, and how dare she. But on the flip, sex work would not exist if it weren't for men objectifying women. If it weren't for men, this industry wouldn't be as prevalent or as dangerous as it is. I felt watching Anora that the entire thing was Sean Baker's abuse fantasy, that he was putting himself in the position of the oligarch because he himself is a very rich, powerful white man. If he could pay a stripper for 2 weeks to just screw around with him and marry him and then leave her, he could, and he would. Even if this movie stayed exactly the same, nothing changed but the promotion, then maybe I would be a little bit less hateful toward it. Because I think that the promotion of this movie is what really led me to be so upset in the cinema. Mind you, it's taken me years to be able to fully articulate why I hate this movie so much. I think that if this movie had stayed exactly the same, but it had been promoted as what it was, which is the male lens on Annie and the treatment of Annie, and it's about what if she had picked the right one when they're all wrong, when she shouldn't have had to just pick a man for her life to go better, then yeah, maybe it could have been a movie that and I'm not the only woman I know who feels this way about this movie, thanks. But what I hated about it was that it was sort of promoted to me. I was 20 when it came out, and it was sort of promoted to me, at least, or my demographic, as this big feminist film and this like big uplifting of sex workers and like new age feminism on how sex work is feminist and it is all these things. And I personally don't believe that sex work is feminist. However, I also don't believe that it's anti-feminist. I think it exists in this strange grey area where I understand where women have to or choose to do it, but I also understand that it exists based on objectification. But this movie is not feminist. This movie does not treat women well. There's not a single female character in this movie that is painted in an even remotely positive light. There is only women who are abused or abusive. Annie is repeatedly abused. Financially, physically, and verbally. And sexually. Throughout the entire length of this film. When his mother shows up, she is a woman who is married to a Russian oligarch and has to control her uncontrollable sexual fiend of a son. So she is in this position of having to run these lives and in a very tense position. And she continues to abuse Annie herself because it is a cycle, because she sold herself to an oligarch and she just chose the right one. I truly don't see how this movie is feminist. I truly don't see how this film is feminist, how it helps women, uplifts women, or even showcases legitimate struggles that women have to go through. I don't think that it's right to make prostitution and strippers comparable. I think that a big part of this movie was Sean Baker's own wish to go into a strip club, have a young woman take her shirt off for him, and then have her climb on top of him and do him. What I think this movie had the power to cause is a lot more sexual assaults in clubs. I think that this movie had the power to make a lot of men, if they had watched it, I'm not sure this even happened, but I'm just saying that there is a chance that a man could watch this movie, go into a strip club, ask a woman for a private dance, take her into a room, and then do more. And she might tell him to stop and he might not. And that is terrifying, because these two things are not synonymous. And I don't think they should ever be a given synonymous, because yes, it exists, and yes, this type of work exists, and yes, this conjunction of work exists. However, I do always think it's important to word the distinction, to make it a clear distinction of which do you do, because you are not automatically a prostitute for being a stripper. That is to say, I think that it plays into rape culture in a way that is incredibly covert, and in a way that I think a lot of people won't notice and didn't notice and haven't noticed until it's too late. That right now it exists in a grey area, but I think that as time goes on and as women's voices are shouted over more and more, because they are and they have been, and this movie will either fall into obscurity or be held up as like one of the best movies ever made. And while it is incredibly well made, I don't think it should be allowed to have that accolade. Now, I know at the start of this video I mentioned Euphoria and that I had a lot of feelings on that as well. Even did mild Euphoria style makeup, but I just like pink. But I feel like this video is getting too long and a little bit too depressing. So if you would like to hear my opinions on Euphoria, ask me in the comments. I'd love to make a second video talking about my opinions on Euphoria and why I think Sam Levinson is the same, if not worse, than Sean Baker. But yeah, for right now, I think that's it. I really hate this movie, and that's all I gotta say. I think it's a really terrible movie, and I think that if you haven't seen it and you've been planning on seeing it, I think that you can take it off your watch list, read the Wikipedia synopsis, and be done with your day, because there's better things to do. There's many, many better movies to watch. A woman on TikTok who I really admire and think is a really good film reviewer called Stoobs. I'll put her at, and I'll link the video in the description if I'm able. Did a video sort of in the same vein as this, focused mostly on Euphoria, but briefly mentions Anora, and she has a very good point of view on the whole thing, which I think that a lot of you should watch, and I think that is a really good jumping off point if you really want to look into this whole concept in cinema. And there's also so many other movies about sex workers that are just better and that don't have to be tarred by men, because at the end of the day, sex workers are people. They are women, and they are in far more vulnerable situations than most people care to give them credit for, and I think that's important to note. Anyway, thank you for watching my first video in so long. I'm sorry it was a bit of a heavy one, but I've been thinking about it for a while, and 3 years in fact, and I just think that I was finally in a position where I was able to talk about it and articulate it well. So if you can watch it to the end, I really appreciate you, and I hope to see you in my next one, even if it is a year away. Have a lovely day.